knowledge on whether you think we should or shouldn't keep the corpus of knowledge that we have acquired as humanity. Personally, as a woman, for instance, I'll give you a very simple example. I wouldn't be willing to put away the knowledge that comes to me in order to be able to, for instance, have control over my reproductive system, birth control. I wouldn't want to give that up. I wouldn't want to give up the knowledge that would make it easier for me to give birth. How would that tie into a future society where we have willingly or unwillingly, in the case of a civilizational crash, given that up? And what are the pathways to perhaps not giving that up or not giving that up fully, conserving some knowledge as tools and giving up certain knowledge as technology or whatnot?
There'll be a lot of different choices on that. We were talking about this earlier today, the thing about, for example, childbirth, and that seemingly in modernity that's virtually treated as some kind of disease, and where childbirth was much more natural before. It wasn't, you didn't have this huge incidence of cesareans and so forth, that just because it's, with industrial medicine, in other words, it's not always making it better, you know. It's
no, I agree with you, but I mean, in the past, and I'm not sure if that is that itself, maybe it's a manifestation of the disease of a culture, but a lot of women still die in childbirth for various reasons, and I'm not willing to go back to that.
Women were, of course, historically persecuted to make them give up that knowledge. That's a relevant point.
I think capitalists too are all over like in new ways of like having birth, like making Whole Foods selling all these new like herbs that were utilized by indigenous like societies, you know, thousands of years ago, and because that's like specialized information that you need to have money to access at this point in this culture. But it's just like, I feel like a lot of ways just like that type of information is standardized so people lack any degree of intellectual self-sufficiency when it comes to their own body and are completely dependent on Eurocentric sciences that are most likely male-oriented anyway. And I just think it's interesting how, like, not only in terms of having like personal like knowledge in terms of how to deal with that historically, there's also like community-based rituals like the Ojibwe Moon Lodge, for example, that like had such a community respect for like a woman and her responsibility for her own body when it came to menstruation or when it came to pregnancy and so on, as opposed to like Eurocentric science having complete control over the destiny of like a female body.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's explained to you the genesis of Maison Verte, where it came from. I'm not sure if you're aware that 10 years ago we had a mini collapse of civilization in Montreal. It was an ice storm, and I saw about how things can go from, you know, perfect civilization to people going like, my cell phone doesn't work, and electricity, no heat. I mean, this happened over, you know, in Montreal 7 days, in the country a month, and that was when I started to see how fragile, you know, civilization is. That it can go into a chaos and anarchy. But in a way, I'm thinking more and more that our civilization is our anarchy. It's not balanced, and because there are things. I'll just bring up one thing. Watching PBS television special on cars and saying only 1% of a gallon of gasoline is used to move the person. 1% of a gallon is used to move a person in a car. The rest is being used to move the metal and everything else, the wheels. And this is stupidity. I mean, if you look at this, this is like idiotic. But our civilization saying cars are wonderful, and you know, carbon society. And to go back to another thing I want to say was, I'm not sure if you know the study of agnology, which is a study of how our civilization produces ignorance. It's a woman and Berkeley who started it. and she did a study on South America and primitive societies, and she was studying all the herbs and different things which are found in the New World, like potatoes. It was done deliberately to ignore this. And that's what happens in our society and civilization. They ignore 1% of a gallon is stupid, but that's ignorance. We're producing this. Our civilization is producing ignorance. It's anarchy. And I don't know, maybe what you're proposing is better. I'm not sure, but I mean, I feel there's a lack of balance. Do you feel that? I mean,
isn't anarchy a world without systems of institutionalized domination?
I
Because
don't
that
know.
sounds like
I don't
your relationship with knowledge is completely predetermined by a foreign source of domination. Therefore,
No,
it doesn't seem
I'm
like
just saying this technology is something which exists in all our civilizations and perhaps in everybody. We even tend to lie to ourselves, and that's something in psychology and psychiatry, which is very well founded.
I'm just saying anarchy to me means a world without institutionalized systems of domination and control.
Well,
And it seems like
I
what
don't
you're
know.
describing
I
is
don't know
a world in contrast of that. So
Which
just
is-
like your terminology
Which
is
would be what?
frustrating. Huh?
The world without domination would be what?
Anarchy.
And anarchy would be what?
No police, no...
I don't really feel like it's important.
No humans. In other words, no human beings.
No, that's exactly not what I said, I think.
Because, I mean, are human beings essentially
But
anarchists or but do they essentially produce ignorance, which it seems to me they do. And where they go.
well, I feel like there's a system in place that perpetuates a culture that does that. And I think it's important to
The system
recognize
is
that.
produced by who?
I feel like, for example, that's a huge question that could go on for hours, and I really don't want to go on for hours because it already has gone on for hours, and the pace
Maybe a
is
good
frustrating.
contrast is between
But-
anarchy versus disorder. Maybe you're talking about disorder, violence, and
Yeah, you're,
versus anarchy, which is a form of order that is more organic and
So you're saying anarchy is more,
that's a better
you
definition.
can't really
I think.
define anarchy because that would completely eliminate the subjectivity of it that makes it without domination. Otherwise, you're creating social programs, which is just a different way of asserting a different culture, which is just a different type of civilization, because it prevents people from being able to live free lives and determine their own destiny.
Anarchy is just routinely used for so long now as just a pejorative. If there's disorder, Beirut that's anarchy. Mere anarchy is loosed on the world. I mean, that's not. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. I mean, that's just. It's too bad that enters the kind of colors of discourse because it's used so often that way. Anything negative and threatening and so forth is anarchy. But people. I forget where this first comes from, but I think it really does make a lot of sense that the original anarchist society and really the only anarchist society was band society, because it didn't have politics, it didn't have rulers or a government or anything. That was an organic situation where people had to help each other, and that was their society. That I think that fits what we would call anarchy.
So you said band society?
Right, band society.
What do you mean by band?
Well, that society was comprised of bands of maybe 60 people.
Oh, I see.
The number varies, but pretty small numbers.
Right.
And well, yeah, that's a whole thing in itself. And conflict or leading to weapons or anarchy in that pejorative sense, they had various mechanisms. People were free to go to a different band. I mean, that was a non-repressive way to handle that. That was a common practice. And, they had a lot of ways to try to defeat hierarchy, for one thing, from starting. And it was a very conscious way to live, and which it retained for so very long.
Important not to talk about human beings in the past as having done these things, because there are human cultures right now who are doing these things, who are carrying on these what I would call legacies of freedom and sustainability, and those are really important to acknowledge and understand. The forms of resistance that they've taken on, the forms of adaptation when resistance failed, and resistance re-emerging, and how basically